Where did $47 million of education money go? One question. 8 seconds of deafening silence. A governor frozen in shock. And just like that, Ron DeSantis's carefully constructed political facade shattered on live television. No shouting, no dramatic accusations. Just one woman who refused to be silenced asking the question nobody dared to ask. And when she did, total, political, meltdown. The moment has now been viewed over 10 million times, exposing one of the most brazen cases of financial deception in American politics. But to understand how Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett demolished one of America's most powerful politicians with a single question, we need to see how this trap was set. The tension in that federal courtroom was palpable as DeSantis sat there, his arrogance evaporating in real time, replaced by panic as he frantically searched for an answer that didn't exist. This wasn't just a political stumble. It was a complete implosion of power caught on camera for the entire nation to witness. Hit that subscribe button and smash, like if you believe politicians should answer for every dollar they take from our schools. Because what you're about to witness isn't just political theater. It's a masterclass in how truth can bring power to its knees. In one corner, Ron DeSantis, Florida's controversial governor, a man who built his brand on swagger and absolute control, a political heavyweight who entered that federal courthouse in D.C. like he owned the place, smirking, nodding to the press, adjusting his microphone with the confidence of someone who's never truly been challenged. His reputation preceded him, the unapologetic culture warrior, the potential presidential contender, the man who governed Florida with an iron grip and dismissed critics as irrelevant noise. His body language screamed dominance as he settled into the witness chair, legs spread wide, shoulders back, eyes scanning the room with casual disdain. In the other corner, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, not part of the Florida delegation, not even listed as a primary interrogator. She was invited quietly as a financial oversight specialist, the last person DeSantis expected to fear. She entered without fanfare, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the governor's performative confidence. No media entourage, no prepared sound bites, just a slim folder and laser-focused attention. The stakes? $200 million in unaccounted education spending from Florida. The setting? A federal hearing broadcast live to millions of Americans. The gallery packed with journalists, political operatives, and citizens. The microphones polished to capture every word, every breath, every moment of hesitation. The tension palpable as the American flag hung still behind the panel, a silent witness to what was about to unfold. This wasn't just another government hearing. This was a showdown between arrogance and accountability, between political theater and cold, hard truth. DeSantis came prepared for the usual political dance: deflect, redirect, control the narrative. What he wasn't prepared for was someone who refused to play by those rules. And as the cameras rolled and America watched, nobody could have predicted how completely one woman would dismantle a political machine with surgical precision. If you've ever wanted to see what happens when political spin meets unspinnable truth, you're about to find out. The hearing began like a performance DeSantis had rehearsed 1,000 times. He didn't answer questions. He redirected them with practiced ease, his responses slick and rehearsed. He interrupted at will, cutting off committee members mid-sentence whenever their inquiries became too pointed. He even joked, "Some folks just don't understand Florida priorities," drawing chuckles from the room while the cameras panned across amused congressional faces. His supporters nodded approvingly. This was the DeSantis they knew: commanding, dismissive, untouchable. He was in control. He was comfortable. He was untouchable. Then she walked in. No entourage, no stack of notes, just calm determination. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took her seat at the panel without fanfare, opened a slim brown folder, clicked her pen once, and waited. Her eyes never left DeSantis, studying his performance with the patience of a predator assessing its prey. The room didn't go silent, but something shifted. The gravity changed. If you were paying attention, you could feel it. The subtle recalibration of power, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. One by one, state attorneys presented their reports: charts, PowerPoint slides, budget summaries, a choreographed dance of numbers and jargon designed to overwhelm and confuse. They spoke of allocation efficiencies and cross-departmental resource optimization, words that sounded important but explained nothing. But beneath the polished surface lurked something strange. Every presentation glossed over the same gaps. Large community investment payments buried under ambiguous titles, future innovation grants, Sunshine Acceleration Fund, and one simply labeled SFFF initiative. Each presenter skipped over these items with practiced smoothness, never lingering long enough for questions. When Crockett finally attempted to speak, the first interruption came swift and dismissive. "Congresswoman Crockett, with all due respect," a Florida state attorney said, leaning into his microphone with practiced condescension, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "This is a highly localized issue. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Florida's community education priorities." His eyes flicked toward DeSantis, seeking approval for the successful deflection. The dig was obvious, the message clear. "You don't belong here. You don't understand. You're an outsider." This was the first attempt to neutralize her, to frame her questions as ignorance rather than inquiry. Some in the room snickered. Others looked down, suddenly uncomfortable with the naked attempt to silence her. But Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't reply. She simply closed her folder with deliberate slowness, her face betraying nothing as she sat back and continued to observe. If you've ever seen a chess master deliberately sacrifice a piece to set up a winning move, you'd recognize the strategy. The next speaker stood up, launching into another glowing report, another round of vague numbers, another wave of polished deflection. Every time Crockett tried to speak, another voice would jump in. A new slide, a deflection, an explanation wrapped in too many acronyms. The pattern was obvious now. They were filibustering her, drowning her in details while avoiding the central question. At one point, she leaned toward her microphone, preparing to address the committee, but was cut off again, this time by a polished man in a navy suit, his tie the same color as the Florida state flag, his Harvard law ring catching the light as he gestured dismissively. "Congresswoman," he began with a rehearsed smile, teeth too white, voice too smooth. "As I said earlier, this isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about understanding Florida's educational climate, something I'm not sure you're familiar with." There it was again, the strategy as old as power itself. Talk long enough, use big enough words, and hope the truth dies quietly. Label her an outsider, suggest she couldn't possibly understand. And no one on the panel pushed back. They just moved on, complicit in their silence. If you've ever been talked over, dismissed, or told you wouldn't understand, drop a like right now, because what happened next is for everyone who's ever been silenced. But Crockett didn't leave. She didn't raise her voice. She just listened and watched, her stillness becoming increasingly unnerving to those who expected her to fight back on their terms. Because while they were busy talking around the issue, she had already found its center. The slush fund wasn't just real. It was protected by silence, by procedure, by the illusion of local context no one could quite explain. And the more they interrupted her, the more obvious it became. They weren't defending Florida's schools. They were defending each other. Their nervous glances, their overlapping explanations, their desperate attempts to prevent her from speaking, all of it revealed the truth more clearly than any document could. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless. No tapping fingers, no sighs, no raised eyebrows. Just silence while attorneys traded jargon and sidestepped accountability. Her stillness became a presence in itself, drawing eyes even as the parade of explanations continued. She stayed quiet not out of weakness, but out of precision, because sometimes the loudest person in the room is the one who's still listening. She waited through 3 more presentations, each more technical and jargon-filled than the last. PowerPoint slides crowded with tiny numbers flashed by too quickly to read. Speakers talked faster, as if racing against an invisible clock. The desperation in the room was becoming palpable, sweat beginning to show through expensive suits. And when the final attorney leaned back, satisfied with his talking points and buzzwords, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth, Jasmine raised her hand. Not to speak over anyone, not to interrupt. Just one motion, clear, calm, intentional. The gesture was almost gentle, but it cut through the room like a spotlight. The moderator hesitated, looked around the room. No one objected, so he nodded. Congresswoman Crockett, you may proceed. That's when the room shifted. The camera operator positioned behind the judge's bench instinctively zoomed in, sensing the pivotal moment. Viewers across the country leaned forward, some watching from classrooms with peeling paint, some from government offices with fluorescent lights, some from break rooms in schools that hadn't seen a budget increase in years. The air in the room seemed to crystallize. Jasmine leaned toward her mic. Not a single paper in front of her. No slideshow. No grandstanding. Just one question that she had waited patiently to ask, letting them exhaust their defenses before she even began her attack. She turned slowly to face Ron DeSantis, still seated at the witness table. His arms were crossed, his chin raised, the posture of a man still certain of his invulnerability, until she asked, Governor DeSantis, she began, her voice steady, clear as a bell in the suddenly quiet room. Could you explain why a fund called the Sunshine Future Fund received $47 million from Florida's education budget, yet not a single school, teacher, or student has ever heard of it? The question hung in the air, simple, direct, unavoidable. And just like that, the entire hearing cracked open. DeSantis blinked. Then again, rapidly, like someone waking to bright light. He reached for a file, opened it, flipped a page, then another. No answer, no defense. Just rustling paper and a growing silence that seemed to expand with each passing second. His attorney shifted uncomfortably, mouthing something to the aide beside him, who shook his head slightly, eyes wide with panic. No one spoke. No one even coughed. The moment was live. No cuts, no edits, no spin. Just raw, unfiltered reality beaming into millions of homes. Jasmine didn't follow up. She didn't push. She just watched him, her gaze steady and unblinking. The question wasn't a trap. It wasn't theatrical. It was the kind of question that doesn't need volume because truth speaks for itself. A question so precise, it could only be answered with truth or damning silence. For a moment, it felt like the room had stopped breathing. Ron DeSantis kept flipping pages, first slowly, then faster, his movements becoming increasingly erratic, like the answer might magically appear if he just turned one more sheet. It didn't. The folder in front of him was full of charts and talking points about educational innovation and future-focused investment. But none of them explained where $47 million had gone or why no one in Florida's education system had ever heard of the fund it was sent to. Behind him, one of the lead attorneys from Florida leaned forward and whispered something to another, his hand cupped over his mouth to prevent lip reading. The other just shook his head, a tiny movement that spoke volumes. Another aide, barely 25, sweating through his blazer, his political career flashing before his eyes, stood up as if to say something, then sat right back down, realizing there was no rescue to offer. The weight of the question was too heavy. Even the moderator didn't know what to do. He glanced left, then right, searching for someone, anyone, to move the hearing forward. No one did. And in broadcast studios across the country, the live commentators fell quiet. For nearly 8 seconds, nothing but the soft hum of the courtroom speakers could be heard. No analysis, no defense, no attempt to spin it, just silence. Because when power is cornered by truth, words suddenly lose their strength. The silence inside that courtroom didn't stay there. It exploded online. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine's question flooded every major platform, spreading with the unstoppable force of a digital tsunami. On X, formerly Twitter, journalists scrambled to transcribe her exact words, the hashtag #47 million appearing in posts thousands of times per minute. One reporter posted, "Breaking. Rapier Jasmine Crockett just asked DeSantis where $47 million in education funding disappeared to." No answer, no defense, just silence. So where is the money? That hashtag caught fire in under an hour, trending across all 50 states, the digital equivalent of a nationwide protest erupting spontaneously. Teachers reposted it with photos of broken school supplies, cracked whiteboards, outdated textbooks held together with tape, classroom computers from the early 2000s. Parents shared videos of overcrowded classrooms where students sat on floors because there weren't enough desks. Even high school students began stitching together TikToks comparing budget reports to real-life conditions in their schools. Broken desks, outdated textbooks, overcrowded halls, bathrooms missing stall doors, ceilings with water damage. The disconnect was now undeniable, and the anger impossible to contain, a collective fury that transcended political affiliation. If you're watching this and you've ever sat in a classroom with leaking ceilings while politicians claimed there wasn't enough money for repairs, hit that like button hard. By noon the next day, 3 major newspapers had launched parallel investigations, deploying teams of reporters to follow the money trail. One outlet published an expose revealing that the Sunshine Future Fund, the mysterious recipient of the $47 million, wasn't educational at all. It was a political action committee, a quiet one, not registered under DeSantis' name directly, but deeply tied to several of his former advisors, campaign staffers, and donors. The paper published organizational charts showing the connections, a web of influence that all led back to the governor's inner circle. Its mission? Advancing state-level innovation. Its spending record? Billboards promoting DeSantis' policies, private consulting fees to firms owned by former staffers, event venues for fundraisers disguised as educational summits. Not a single dollar traceable to a school, a teacher, or a student. Not one classroom supplied, not one program funded, not one child served. And when asked for comment, the fund's listed contact disconnected their phone line. Their office address turned out to be a UPS store mailbox. What began as one question had now become a full-blown national investigation. Cable news anchors debated it live, their chirons screaming, "Education money mystery," and "Florida's missing millions." Members of Congress called for an audit, with representatives from both parties demanding accountability. And in Florida, local reporters began knocking on doors, trying to find anyone who had ever heard of the fund. No one had. Even principals who were supposed to benefit from those innovation grants said they'd never received a memo, let alone a dollar. One elementary school principal told a local station, "We're using textbooks from 2008 and fixing our own plumbing. If there's innovation money, we sure haven't seen it." Fox News scrambled to defend DeSantis, with one commentator claiming, "This is just another witch hunt against a conservative leader." But even they couldn't explain the missing millions, their defenses growing increasingly strained as the evidence mounted. CNN ran nonstop coverage with the chyron, "Florida education scandal, $47 million missing," bringing in financial experts to explain how public funds could be diverted through shell organizations. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow dedicated an entire segment to breaking down the money trail, showing how the Sunshine Future Fund had connections to at least 3 other political organizations, all sharing the same post office box. Her trademark detailed analysis making the complex web of financial misdirection understandable to the average viewer. The Washington Post published a devastating infographic showing what $47 million could have bought for Florida schools. 940,000 new textbooks, salaries for 782 teachers, or repairs for 235 school buildings. The graphic went viral, shared hundreds of thousands of times, making the abstract number concrete in terms of lost educational opportunities. Social media couldn't get enough. The clip of DeSantis flipping through papers, desperately searching for an answer that didn't exist, became an instant meme. People used it to react to everything from relationship excuses to workplace blunders. Me looking for my motivation after saying I'll start my diet tomorrow, with DeSantis's panicked page flipping underneath. Late-night comedians had a field day, with Stephen Colbert doing a 3-minute impression of the governor frantically searching through papers while sweating profusely. But beneath the humor lay something more powerful, a genuine public awakening. Parents who had never paid attention to school board meetings were suddenly demanding answers about their own district's finances. Teachers who had been told for years that budget cuts were inevitable were now asking why millions could disappear into a political slush fund while they bought supplies out of their own pockets. Students themselves began organizing, with high schoolers across Florida staging walkouts with signs reading, "Where's our $47 million?" The illusion had shattered, because this wasn't about party lines anymore. It wasn't about blue or red, it was about trust, and what happens when the people discover it's been quietly traded away. And while some tried to defend the governor, citing technicalities and forward-looking initiatives, the public had already made up its mind. You can't lose 47 million dollars without someone noticing, but you can bury it long enough until the wrong person asks the right question. What Jasmine Crockett did that day wasn't just political theater. It was a masterclass in power dynamics, a strategic dismantling of authority that will be studied for years to come. She didn't match DeSantis's arrogance with her own. She didn't try to outshout the shouters or outbully the bullies. Instead, she recognized the most devastating weapon against political corruption: patient, precise truth delivered at exactly the right moment. She understood that power often defeats itself when given enough rope. DeSantis and his team made the classic mistake of powerful people throughout history. They mistook silence for weakness, patience for passivity, observation for intimidation. They interrupted her, talked over her, dismissed her as an outsider who couldn't possibly understand their local context. They performed their dominance for the cameras, certain they were winning, and in doing so, they handed her the perfect opportunity to strike when they least expected it, when their guard was down and their arrogance at its peak. Because Crockett understood something fundamental about power. Those who abuse it expect resistance to look like their own tactics: loud, aggressive, easily dismissed as partisan. They're prepared for that fight. They have talking points ready, counterattacks planned, deflections rehearsed. What they are not prepared for is calm, undeniable truth delivered at exactly the right moment. They have no defense against simple questions that cut through complexity to expose the naked truth. This wasn't just about $47 million, though that money matters deeply to every Florida student sitting in overcrowded classrooms with outdated materials. This was about the entire system of political misdirection that allows public funds to disappear into friendly pockets while those in power insist there's never enough money for actual public needs. It was about the arrogance of those who believe they'll never be held accountable, who count on procedural complexity and public apathy to shield them from scrutiny. The consequences are still unfolding, rippling through American politics like aftershocks from an earthquake. 3 separate congressional subcommittees have announced formal inquiries into the Sunshine Future Fund and all entities tied to it, with subpoena power and forensic accountants ready to trace every dollar. State legislators in Florida have begun calling for independent audits of all educational spending, with several of DeSantis's former allies now distancing themselves, unwilling to go down with a sinking ship. Local newspapers, once cautious about covering stories involving powerful names, now run headlines in bold, unapologetic fonts. Crockett's question, "Where did the money go?" Their investigative teams, emboldened by public support, are digging into other suspicious funds and allocations. For DeSantis, the political damage is severe and possibly irreparable. His carefully cultivated image as a straight-talking, efficient administrator has been replaced by footage of him speechless, frantically flipping through papers, unable to explain where millions in education dollars went. Every future claim he makes about fiscal responsibility will be met with that clip. 8 seconds of damning silence that speaks louder than any defense. Political cartoonists now routinely depict him surrounded by stacks of paper, searching for missing funds. But the most profound consequence isn't political, it's civic. Across America, people are watching this and asking, what other funds are hidden in plain sight? What other public money is being siphoned away while we're told to accept crumbling infrastructure, underfunded schools, and inadequate services? Citizens are attending budget meetings, requesting public records, and demanding transparency with a new understanding that accountability only happens when someone asks the right question at the right time. Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose one fund or embarrass one governor. She reminded Americans that power answers to people, but only when people ask the right questions and refuse to be silenced. She showed that sometimes the most effective challenge to authority isn't matching its volume, but cutting through its noise with surgical precision. If you believe we need more leaders willing to ask these uncomfortable questions, hit subscribe right now. Because this channel is committed to exposing truth, no matter how powerful the people hiding it. She didn't gloat. There was no gotcha moment, no raised fists, no camera-ready soundbite that would play well in campaign ads. Jasmine Crockett simply stood up, gathered her folder, and looked across the room one last time, her dignity intact, her mission accomplished. Ron DeSantis was still seated, his posture now deflated, his earlier swagger replaced by the stiff stillness of a man trying not to crumble on camera. His team was still silent, their earlier interruptions now replaced by averted gazes and nervous throat clearing, and the courtroom still frozen in that peculiar silence that follows when truth finally breaks through the carefully constructed barriers of power. Then, in a voice just loud enough to be heard but soft enough to feel real, not performative, she said, "A question doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to arrive at the right moment." 7 words that captured the essence of effective oversight, of speaking truth to power, of democratic accountability. And with that, she walked out. No press conference waiting in the hallway. No interviews with eager reporters. No victory lap on cable news. Just the sound of her heels echoing down the marble hallway as America leaned in, collectively holding its breath at witnessing something authentic in a world of political theater. The clip of her question had already gone viral, but that line, that one sentence, was what sent it into history. Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed more than 10 million times across platforms. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Not because it was partisan, but because it transcended partisanship. Teachers reposted it saying, "We've been asking about funding for years." She asked once, and the whole system froze. Parents shared it with captions like, "Finally, someone speaking for the people who've been ignored." Journalists cited it as an example of effective questioning, political science professors added it to their curriculum, and ordinary citizens saw in it a model for how to engage with power, not with matching aggression, but with unwavering focus on truth. In that moment, watching the nation respond, watching classrooms share her voice, watching lawmakers scramble to explain what they had ignored for years, we all realized something. Jasmine Crockett didn't ask that question to win a debate. She asked it to wake us up. She didn't speak to be heard. She spoke so the truth could finally echo through the halls of power and into the consciousness of a nation too often distracted by political theater to see the substance beneath. And that's the lesson for all of us. In a world of political noise, sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't shouting louder. It's asking the one question no one wants to answer and then having the courage to let the silence speak. It's refusing to be distracted by procedure, intimidated by authority, or silenced by those who claim you don't belong in the conversation. So what do you think? Did DeSantis deserve to be exposed this way? Or was this just political theater? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Crockett a hero for education, or was this just another partisan attack? I want to hear your perspective. And if you want to see more moments where truth cuts through the noise, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because in politics, the most explosive moments aren't always the loudest. They're the ones where truth finally breaks through.